The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training ground as recruits lined up for what would become one of the most talked-about shooting demonstrations in the base's history. Staff Sergeant Martinez stood before them, his weathered face stern and uncompromising, scanning the group of fresh-faced soldiers who had barely finished their basic training. Among them stood Private Sarah Chen, a quiet 22-year-old from small-town Oregon who had enlisted 6 months earlier. She kept her eyes forward, trying to blend in with the other recruits, though something about her steady gaze and calm demeanor set her apart from the nervous energy radiating from her peers. The sergeant's voice boomed across the field as he explained the day's exercise. They were at the advanced marksmanship range, where only the most skilled shooters typically trained. The target stood 800 yards away, barely visible to the naked eye, with additional obstacles including wind flags that showed gusting crosswinds and elevation changes that would challenge even experienced marksmen. "Listen up, soldiers," Sergeant Martinez barked, his voice carrying the authority of 20 years in the service. "Today you'll witness what real precision shooting looks like. This range has humbled some of our best snipers. The target you see out there has been hit successfully only 12 times in the past 5 years by qualified marksmen." He gestured toward the distant target, a small metal disc that caught the sunlight intermittently. 800 yards, 15-mile-per-hour crosswind, uphill angle of 12 degrees. The margin for error is less than 2 inches in any direction. Most of you couldn't hit the broadside of a barn at half that distance. The recruits shifted uncomfortably, some squinting toward the target, others stealing glances at the high-powered rifle resting on the shooting bench. The weapon itself was intimidating, a precision instrument that cost more than most of their annual salaries. Sarah listened intently, her mind automatically calculating the variables the sergeant had mentioned. Growing up in rural Oregon, she had learned to hunt with her grandfather from the age of 10. While the other kids in her town were playing video games, she was learning about wind drift, bullet trajectory, and the patience required for a clean shot. Her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran, had taught her that shooting wasn't about strength or aggression, but about understanding physics, reading conditions, and achieving a moment of perfect calm. "The rifle you see here is a military-grade precision system," the sergeant continued, his tone growing more serious. "It's zeroed for these exact conditions, but that doesn't make the shot easy. The slightest tremor, the smallest miscalculation, and you'll miss by yards, not inches." He paused, surveying the group with a look that suggested he found their chances of success laughable. "I've been instructing marksmanship for 15 years. I've seen soldiers who thought they were hotshots fail spectacularly at distances half of what you're looking at today. Confidence without skill is just arrogance, and arrogance gets people killed in combat." The wind picked up, causing the flags downrange to snap and flutter more vigorously. Several recruits unconsciously took a step back, as if the distance between them and the target had somehow become more daunting. "The bullet drop at this distance is approximately 68 inches, Sergeant Martinez explained, his voice taking on a technical tone. "That means you're not aiming at the target you see, you're aiming at empty space well above it, trusting physics and mathematics to bring your shot down to the mark. Add in the wind deflection, and you're essentially shooting at air and hoping everything comes together perfectly." Private Johnson, a stocky recruit from Texas who had bragged extensively about his hunting experience, raised his hand tentatively. "Sergeant, what if someone wanted to try the shot?" The sergeant's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Son, this isn't a carnival game. This is advanced military marksmanship. You'd be more likely to win the lottery than make this shot on your first try. Hell, you'd be more likely to hit it if you closed your eyes and prayed." Sarah felt something stir inside her as she watched the sergeant's dismissive attitude. She understood his perspective, knew that overconfidence could indeed be dangerous, but something about his absolute certainty that none of them could succeed rubbed her the wrong way. It reminded her of the skepticism she had faced throughout her life whenever people assumed that a quiet girl from a small town couldn't possibly have real skills. "Besides," the sergeant continued, "even if by some miracle someone managed to hit it once, that would be pure luck. Consistency is what matters in military operations. One lucky shot doesn't make a marksman. You'd have to hit it multiple times to prove it wasn't just a fluke." The challenge in his voice was unmistakable, though he clearly didn't expect anyone to take him up on it. Sarah found herself studying the conditions more carefully, noting how the wind seemed to gust in a pattern, observing the way the light played across the target, calculating angles and distances in her head. "The ammunition for this rifle costs $12 per round," Sergeant Martinez announced, holding up one of the precisely crafted bullets. "Each shot represents significant taxpayer money, so we don't waste them on impossible attempts or ego trips."
This demonstration is about showing you the level of skill you might aspire to after years of training and thousands of rounds of practice. He moved to the shooting bench, his movements practiced and efficient.
"Watch carefully. This is how a professional approaches a shot like this." He settled behind the rifle, adjusting his position with the methodical precision of someone who had performed this ritual thousands of times. The recruits gathered closer, forming a semicircle behind the firing line. Sarah found herself drawn forward despite her usual preference for staying in the background. Something about the setup, the challenge, and the sergeant's absolute certainty that it couldn't be done awakened a competitive spirit she usually kept hidden. As Sergeant Martinez prepared for his demonstration shot, Sarah noticed details that others seemed to miss. The way he adjusted his breathing, the subtle movements as he read the wind, the careful calculation in his eyes as he lined up the shot. These were all things her grandfather had taught her, principles that transcended the specific weapon or distance. "The key to long-distance shooting," the sergeant explained as he settled into position, "is eliminating every variable you can control and accurately reading the ones you can't. Your heartbeat, your breathing, your muscle tension, these all affect the shot. Master these, and you have a chance. Ignore them, and you're just wasting ammunition." Sarah watched as he took his shot, the rifle's report echoing across the range. Through the spotting scope, they could see his bullet had struck low and right of the target, missing by perhaps 6 inches. For most people, it would have been an impressive near miss at such an extreme distance. "Wind got me," the sergeant said matter-of-factly, though there was a hint of frustration in his voice. "Conditions out here change constantly. What looks like a steady crosswind from here might be swirling in 3 different directions between here and the target." He stood up, gesturing to the rifle. "That's why this shot is essentially impossible for inexperienced shooters. It requires not just technical skill, but an understanding that takes years to develop. You can't just point and shoot at these distances." As the group began to disperse for the next part of their training, Sarah lingered near the shooting bench. The rifle lay there, still warm from the sergeant's shot, representing both a challenge and an opportunity. She had listened to every word of his explanation, absorbed every detail of his technique, and felt the familiar calm that always preceded her best shooting. The sergeant was packing up his equipment when he noticed her standing there. "Something on your mind, Private Chen?" Sarah looked up at him, her voice quiet but steady. "Sergeant, I was wondering if I could attempt the shot." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Other recruits who were within earshot stopped what they were doing, turning to stare at the small figure who had just volunteered for what their instructor had essentially called an impossible task. Sergeant Martinez studied her with new attention, taking in her slight build, her calm demeanor, and the serious expression in her eyes. "Private, did you hear anything I just said? This isn't a game. This is advanced marksmanship that challenges our best-trained snipers." "I understand, Sergeant," Sarah replied, her voice unwavering, "but I'd still like to try." The sergeant's expression shifted from surprise to something approaching amusement. "You think you can make a shot that our trained marksmen struggle with? What's your shooting experience, Private?" "I've been hunting since I was 10, Sergeant. My grandfather taught me long-range shooting in conditions similar to these." Several of the other recruits exchanged glances, some smirking at what they perceived as naive overconfidence. The idea that someone with hunting experience could compete with military precision shooting seemed absurd to most of them. Sergeant Martinez set down his equipment case, his expression becoming more serious. "Private Chen, hunting deer at 200 yards is not the same as precision shooting at military distances. The fundamentals might be similar, but the application is entirely different." "I understand that, Sergeant," Sarah said quietly, "but I'd still like the opportunity to try." For a long moment, the sergeant studied her face, looking for signs of the bravado or false confidence he was used to seeing in recruits who overestimated their abilities. Instead, he saw something different in her expression, a quiet certainty that wasn't based on ego but on experience.
Tell me about this grandfather of yours, he said finally. Sarah's expression softened slightly. He was a Marine sniper in Vietnam, Sergeant. He spent 4 years teaching me everything he learned there. We practiced in all kinds of weather, different distances, moving targets. He said shooting was like meditation, that you had to become one with the rifle and the conditions. The sergeant's demeanor changed noticeably at the mention of Vietnam and Marine sniper training. He knew the reputation of those men, understood the level of skill and discipline they possessed. "What's your longest successful shot?" he asked, his tone now more professional than dismissive. 730 yards, Sarah answered without hesitation. Buck deer in crosswind conditions similar to these, single shot, clean kill. The range fell silent except for the sound of wind through the flags downrange. Even the recruits who had been snickering seemed to realize that the conversation had taken a more serious turn. Sergeant Martinez looked out at the target, then back at Sarah, then at the rifle on the bench. His expression suggested he was weighing factors that went beyond simple marksmanship. "Private Chen," he said finally, "if I allow you to attempt this shot, and you miss, which is the most likely outcome, you'll be providing ammunition for every doubter who thinks women don't belong in combat roles. Are you prepared for that responsibility?" Sarah met his gaze directly. "Sergeant, if I miss, it'll be because I made a mistake, not because of my gender. And if I hit it, it'll be because I applied the skills my grandfather taught me, not because I got lucky." The sergeant nodded slowly, recognizing something in her tone that reminded him of the most reliable soldiers he had served with over the years. "Very well, Private. You'll get your chance. But understand that this demonstration will be observed and discussed. There's no pressure quite like an audience expecting you to fail." As word spread that one of the new recruits was going to attempt the impossible shot, more people began gathering at the range. What had started as a routine training exercise was turning into an event that would be remembered long after the day was over. Word traveled fast on a military base, especially when something unexpected was about to happen. By the time Sarah approached the shooting bench, nearly 50 people had gathered behind the firing line. Officers, non-commissioned officers, and fellow recruits formed a growing crowd, all drawn by curiosity about the private who thought she could make a shot that had humbled experienced marksmen. Captain Rodriguez, the company commander, had arrived after hearing about the unusual demonstration from his office. He stood with his arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with professional interest. In his 12 years of service, he had seen plenty of recruits with inflated opinions of their abilities, but something about this situation felt different. Sarah ignored the whispers and stares as she approached the rifle. The weight of attention was considerable, but she had learned long ago to block out distractions when it mattered most. Her grandfather had taught her that shooting was a conversation between the marksman, the rifle, and the conditions, and outside noise had no place in that dialogue. "Before you begin," Sergeant Martinez announced to the crowd, "let me explain what Private Chen is attempting. 800 yards, significant crosswind, uphill angle, using a rifle she's never fired before, with ammunition she's not familiar with, under conditions that challenge our most experienced shooters." He gestured toward the distant target, now barely visible as the afternoon light created heat shimmer across the range. "The mathematical probability of success for an inexperienced shooter attempting this shot is less than 5%, and that's being generous." Sarah settled behind the rifle, her movements deliberate and unhurried. The weapon felt substantial in her hands, heavier than her grandfather's hunting rifles, but balanced in a way that suggested precision engineering. She adjusted the bipod legs slightly, settling the rifle into a position that felt natural despite its unfamiliarity. "Take your time, Private," the sergeant said, his voice now carrying a note of genuine encouragement rather than skepticism. "Feel free to ask questions about the rifle's characteristics or the conditions." Sarah nodded, beginning her pre-shot routine exactly as her grandfather had taught her. She started by studying the wind flags downrange, noting how they moved in patterns rather than random gusts. The wind was stronger than what she was used to, but it had a rhythm to it, cycling between stronger and lighter periods with some regularity. "Grandfather always said wind was like breathing," she thought to herself. "It has a natural rhythm if you're patient enough to learn it." She adjusted her position behind the rifle, finding the spot where it pointed naturally, without muscular tension. This was one of the fundamental lessons from her training, that fighting the rifle was counterproductive. The weapon had to become an extension of her body, not something she forced into submission. "The scope is zeroed for 600 yards, Sergeant Martinez informed her. "You'll need to compensate for the additional 200 yards, plus wind drift and the uphill angle." Sarah peered through the scope, studying the target and the space around it. At 800 yards, the target appeared as a small dot, but her experience had taught her to see beyond the obvious aiming point. She was looking for reference points, studying how the light played across the target area, reading the subtle signs that would help her make the necessary adjustments. The crowd had grown quiet, the initial chatter fading as people realized they were witnessing something more serious than a recruit's misguided confidence. Even the skeptics found themselves leaning forward, curious about how this would unfold. Sarah took several deep breaths, each one slower and more deliberate than the last. This was another lesson from her grandfather, that breathing was the foundation of accuracy. Too fast, and your heart rate would affect the shot. Too slow, and you'd lose the natural rhythm needed for consistent trigger control. "Spotting scope confirms wind at 15 miles per hour, gusting to 20, called out Corporal Williams, who was operating the spotting equipment. "Direction is consistent left to right." Sarah mentally processed this information, combining it with her visual reading of the wind flags and her experience with similar conditions. In her mind, she was building a three-dimensional picture of the bullet's flight path, accounting for gravity, wind drift, and the angular challenges of the uphill shot. She settled into the rifle more completely, finding that perfect position where everything aligned naturally. Her left hand supported the rifle without gripping it tightly. Her right hand found the pistol grip with just enough pressure to maintain control, and her eye aligned perfectly with the scope. Through the scope, she could see the target clearly now, a circular metal disc that caught the sunlight occasionally. She wasn't aiming at the target itself, but at a point in space above and to the left of it, trusting in physics and mathematics to bring the bullet down to the mark. "Remember, Private," Sergeant Martinez said quietly, his voice carrying just enough to reach her ears, "this is about more than just hitting the target. Consistency is what matters. Anyone can get lucky once." Sarah heard the challenge in his words, understanding that even if she managed to hit the target, it would likely be dismissed as a fluke unless she could prove otherwise. The thought didn't intimidate her. Instead, it focused her concentration even more sharply. She began her final breathing sequence, the same pattern she had used hundreds of times in the mountains of Oregon. 4 seconds in, hold for 2. 4 seconds out, hold for 2. Then the natural respiratory pause, where the body was perfectly still for just a moment. As her breathing settled into the familiar rhythm, everything around her seemed to fade away. The crowd, the pressure, the sergeant's skepticism, all of it became background noise as she entered the state of focused calm that her grandfather had called the zone. In this state, she was acutely aware of every detail that mattered while completely ignoring everything that didn't. She could feel her heartbeat, slow and steady. She could sense the rifle's balance, the way it wanted to point naturally. She could read the wind flags downrange, noting the slight decrease in velocity that occurred every 30 seconds or so. She waited through 2 complete wind cycles, learning the pattern, understanding how the conditions changed, and returned to baseline. This patience was something that set experienced shooters apart from beginners. The urge to rush the shot was strong, especially with an audience watching, but she had learned that the best shots came when everything aligned perfectly. On the 3rd cycle, as the wind flags showed the lighter period she had been waiting for, Sarah began her final trigger sequence. The trigger on the military rifle was different from what she was used to, but the principles remained the same. Straight back pressure, smooth and consistent, with the surprise break that came from proper technique rather than muscular effort. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the range, the recoil pushing back against her shoulder in a way that felt controlled and manageable. Through the scope, she lost sight of the target momentarily as the rifle moved under recoil, but her follow-through was automatic, maintaining her sight picture and trigger finger position until the rifle settled. "Target!" called Corporal Williams from behind the spotting scope, his voice cutting through the sudden silence. "Center hit!" Repeat, "Center hit on the target." The crowd erupted in surprised chatter, voices mixing disbelief with admiration. Several officers moved to the spotting scope to confirm what they had heard. while others simply stared at Sarah as if seeing her for the first time. Sarah remained behind the rifle for a moment longer, following her grandfather's advice to complete every shot the same way, regardless of the outcome. She engaged the safety, cleared the bolt, and only then looked up from the scope to acknowledge what had happened. Sergeant Martinez stood behind the spotting scope, his expression a mixture of surprise and professional curiosity. "Confirmed hit," he announced to the crowd. "Center of target, approximately 1 inch from the bullseye." The applause that followed was genuine, though mixed with the kind of stunned surprise that comes when expectations are completely overturned. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, extending his hand in congratulation. "Exceptional shooting, Private Chen," he said, his voice carrying the respect one professional gives to another. That was a remarkable demonstration of marksmanship. Sarah accepted the congratulations graciously, but noticed that Sergeant Martinez was studying her with a different expression than before. There was respect there now, but also something that looked like calculation. "Private," the sergeant said, his voice carrying clearly over the crowd noise, "that was an impressive shot. Outstanding, in fact. But as I mentioned earlier, consistency is what separates luck from skill." He gestured toward the rifle, which was being prepared for another round. "In combat situations, you don't get credit for one good shot if you can't repeat it when it matters. The question isn't whether you can hit the target once, it's whether you can hit it when you need to." Sarah understood the challenge implicit in his words. The first shot had proven she could do it, but military standards demanded reliability under pressure. One shot could indeed be luck, but 2 shots would suggest genuine skill. "I understand, Sergeant," she replied quietly. "If you'd like me to attempt it again, I'm ready." The crowd's murmur grew louder at this exchange. What had started as a demonstration was turning into something more significant, a test of ability that went beyond simple marksmanship. Sergeant Martinez nodded slowly. "Very well, Private, but understand that the conditions have changed. The wind has picked up, the light is different, and now you have the pressure of proving the first shot wasn't just beginner's luck." He was right about the conditions. The wind flags downrange were moving more actively now, showing gusts that were stronger and less predictable than during her first shot. The afternoon sun had shifted, creating different shadows and heat patterns that would affect the bullet's flight path. "Additionally," the sergeant continued, "you'll be using the rifle exactly as it sits. No adjustments, no settling time, no extended preparation. In combat, you often have to take the shot immediately when the opportunity presents itself." Sarah nodded her understanding, recognizing that this was a different kind of challenge than the first shot. The technical difficulty was the same, but the psychological pressure was much higher. Everyone was watching for her to fail, to prove that the first hit was indeed just luck. She moved back to the rifle without hesitation, settling into position with the same methodical approach she had used before. This time, however, she was working with a weapon that was already adjusted to her body position, already zeroed from her previous shot. The familiarity was both helpful and potentially misleading. While she now knew how the rifle felt and behaved, the conditions had changed enough that her previous adjustments might not be accurate anymore. Through the scope, she studied the target again, noting how the changing light made it appear slightly different than before. The wind flags told a story of more complex air currents, with conflicting directions at different distances downrange. "Wind has increased to 20 miles per hour, gusting to 20 miles per hour," Corporal Williams reported. "Direction is now variable, showing significant changes between 400 and 600 yards. This was more challenging than the first shot. Variable wind conditions meant that the bullet would experience different forces during different parts of its flight, making calculations more complex and less predictable." Sarah took her time reading the conditions, watching the flags for several minutes to understand the new patterns. Her grandfather had taught her that patience was often more valuable than perfect technique, that understanding the environment was crucial to long-distance accuracy. As she studied the wind, she noticed something that others might miss. While the flags showed variable directions, there was still a rhythm to the changes. The wind wasn't random, but followed patterns related to the terrain and atmospheric conditions. She waded through several cycles, learning how the new patterns worked, understanding the timing of the stronger and weaker periods. This level of patience was unusual in military demonstrations, where quick action was often preferred, but Sarah was following principles that had proven successful in hunting situations where patience was rewarded. "Take your time, Private," Captain Rodriguez said quietly. "Good shooting can't be rushed." Sarah appreciated the support, especially from an officer who understood the difference between taking time to do something right and simple hesitation. She continued her observation of the conditions, noting that every 45 seconds or so, there was a brief period where the wind settled into a more predictable pattern. When the next calm period arrived, Sarah was ready. Her breathing was controlled, her position was stable, and her mental calculations were complete. The trigger break came as a surprise even to her, exactly as it should in precision shooting. The rifle's report seemed louder this time, perhaps because everyone was listening more intently. The recoil felt exactly the same as before, confirming that her position and technique had been consistent between the two shots. "Target!" Corporal Williams called out again, his voice carrying even more surprise than before. "Second hit!" Repeat. Confirmed hit on target. The silence that followed was different from before. The first shot had been surprising. The second shot was beginning to look like genuine skill. Conversations around the range took on a different tone as people realized they had witnessed something unusual. Sergeant Martinez moved to the spotting scope himself this time, taking a long look at the target before making his announcement. "Confirmed second hit," he said, his voice carrying a note of professional respect. "Impact approximately 2 inches from the first shot, well within the target zone." Sarah cleared the rifle and stood up, her expression calm despite the magnitude of what had just happened. Around her, the crowd was buzzing with discussion, but her attention was focused on Sergeant Martinez, who was studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Private Chen," he said finally, his voice carrying across the range, "I owe you an apology. I assumed that inexperience would overcome any natural ability you might possess. You've proven me wrong in the most definitive way possible." He paused, looking out at the target, then back at Sarah. 2 consecutive hits at 800 yards under challenging conditions isn't luck. That's legitimate marksmanship skill that would be impressive for any shooter, regardless of experience level. The acknowledgement from the sergeant carried weight with everyone present. His reputation as a demanding instructor made his praise valuable, and his willingness to admit he had been wrong demonstrated the kind of professional integrity that earned respect in military circles. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward again, his expression serious. "Private Chen, have you given any thought to advanced training opportunities? Marksmanship of this caliber opens doors to specialized units and additional responsibilities." Sarah looked around at the faces watching her, understanding that this moment was about more than just shooting accuracy. She had proven something to herself and to others, demonstrated capabilities that went beyond what anyone had expected. "Sir, I'm interested in any opportunity to serve effectively," she replied. "If my shooting skills can be useful, I'm ready to develop them further." As the crowd began to disperse, discussing what they had witnessed, Sergeant Martinez approached Sarah privately. "Private, I've been teaching marksmanship for 15 years, and I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen shooting like that from someone with your level of formal training." He looked out toward the target, which still bore the evidence of her success. "Your grandfather taught you well. Marine Corps sniper training from that era produced some of the finest marksmen in military history. It's clear that knowledge was passed down effectively." Sarah nodded, thinking about her grandfather and how proud he would have been to see this moment. "He always said that shooting was just the beginning, Sergeant. That the real skill was in knowing when to shoot and when not to." Sergeant Martinez smiled for the first time since the demonstration began. "Sounds like he taught you more than just marksmanship. That kind of judgment is exactly what we look for in advanced programs." As the afternoon sun continued its descent, casting longer shadows across the range, Sarah began to understand that her life in the military was about to take a very different direction than she had originally planned. The news of Sarah's shooting demonstration spread through the base faster than official communications typically traveled. By evening chow, soldiers from other units were seeking her out, wanting to hear firsthand about the recruit who had made impossible shots look routine. The story grew with each telling, though the facts were impressive enough without embellishment. Sarah found herself in an unusual position for a new recruit.
Instead of being anonymous among her peers, she was suddenly a person of interest to senior personnel who had never noticed her before. The attention was both flattering and uncomfortable for someone who had always preferred to let her actions speak louder than her words. 3 days after the shooting demonstration, Sarah was called to report to Captain Rodriguez's office. The walk across the base gave her time to think about how dramatically her situation had changed in such a short time. When she had enlisted, her goal had been simple: serve her country honorably and learn skills that would help her build a good life after the military. Now it seemed like opportunities she had never considered were opening up. Captain Rodriguez's office reflected his professional military bearing. Awards and commendations lined the walls, along with photographs from various deployments and training exercises. Behind his desk hung a unit citation that spoke to the serious nature of the work done by soldiers under his command. "Private Chen, please have a seat," the captain said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "I've been doing some research since your demonstration the other day, and I'd like to discuss some options that might interest you." Sarah sat down, maintaining the respectful posture that military protocol demanded, while trying to read the captain's expression for clues about where this conversation was heading. First, Captain Rodriguez continued, "I want you to understand that what you accomplished was genuinely exceptional. I've spoken with several senior marksmanship instructors, and they all agree that your shooting was at a level typically seen only after extensive specialized training." He opened a folder on his desk, scanning through what appeared to be official documents. "I've also been in contact with some people at higher levels who are very interested in soldiers with your particular skills. The question is whether you're interested in taking your abilities to the next level." Sarah felt her pulse quicken slightly. "Sir, I'm definitely interested in serving in whatever capacity makes the best use of my skills." The captain nodded approvingly. "Good answer. What I'm about to discuss with you is an opportunity that doesn't come along very often. There's a specialized training program that produces some of the military's most elite marksmen. It's extremely demanding, both physically and mentally, and the failure rate is quite high." He leaned back in his chair, studying her reaction. "The program I'm referring to is Scout Sniper School. It's a 20-week course that will push you to your absolute limits and beyond. The curriculum covers advanced marksmanship, field craft, camouflage, observation, and tactical movement. Only about 30% of candidates successfully complete the program." Sarah's mind raced as she processed this information. Scout Sniper School represented the pinnacle of military marksmanship training, an opportunity that most soldiers could only dream about. The fact that it was being offered to her, a recruit with only months of service, was almost unbelievable. "Sir, I'm honored to be considered for such an opportunity," she said carefully. "Could you tell me more about what the training involves?" Captain Rodriguez opened another folder, this one containing detailed information about the sniper program. "The first phase focuses on marksmanship fundamentals, but at a level far beyond what you've experienced so far. You'll be shooting at distances up to 1,200 yards under all weather conditions. Day and night operations, moving targets, and precision shots that require mathematical calculations most people couldn't handle." He turned a page, continuing his explanation. "The second phase covers field craft and camouflage. You'll learn to move undetected through hostile territory, to construct hides that are invisible to enemy observation, and to remain motionless for hours or even days while maintaining operational readiness." Sarah listened intently, understanding that this was far beyond anything she had imagined when she enlisted. The scope of the training was intimidating, but also exciting in a way that surprised her. "The third phase involves advanced tactical applications," the captain continued. "Target identification under combat conditions, range estimation without technological aids, wind reading in complex terrain, and most importantly, the psychological preparation for the realities of precision engagement in combat situations." He closed the folder and looked directly at her. "This isn't just about shooting, Private Chen. Snipers operate independently, often behind enemy lines, making decisions that can affect the outcome of entire operations. The technical skills are just the foundation. The mental toughness and judgment required are what separate successful graduates from those who don't make it through the program."
Sarah considered everything the captain had told her. The opportunity was incredible, but she also understood that accepting it would fundamentally change the trajectory of her military career. "Sir, what would happen to my current training and obligations if I were to enter this program?" "Good question," Captain Rodriguez replied. "You would be transferred immediately to a specialized training unit. Your current basic training would be considered complete based on your demonstrated competence. The sniper program would become your primary military occupation." He leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. "However, there are some important considerations. First, the washout rate is high, and if you don't complete the program successfully, you'll be reassigned to a standard infantry unit. Second, successful completion of sniper school comes with significant additional service obligations. And third, the work itself carries risks that go beyond normal military service." Sarah appreciated his honesty about the challenges and risks involved. It showed that this was a serious professional discussion rather than just an attempt to recruit someone with useful skills. "There's something else you should know," the captain added. "Your shooting demonstration has attracted attention from some very senior people. There's interest in your potential that goes beyond just standard military applications." He paused, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Without going into specifics that I'm not authorized to discuss, there are specialized units within the military that are always looking for individuals with exceptional natural ability, combined with the right temperament for demanding missions." Sarah felt a chill of excitement mixed with apprehension. The captain seemed to be hinting at opportunities that were even more specialized than standard sniper training. "What would be the timeline for making a decision about this, sir?" "The next sniper school class begins in 6 weeks, Captain Rodriguez replied. "I would need your answer within the next week to get the paperwork processed and ensure you have time for the prerequisite medical and psychological evaluations." He stood up, signaling that the meeting was approaching its conclusion. "Private Chen, I want you to think very carefully about this decision. This opportunity could define your entire military career and potentially your life beyond the service. But it's also a commitment that shouldn't be taken lightly." Sarah stood as well, coming to attention as military protocol required. "Sir, I'll give this the serious consideration it deserves. When would you need my final answer?" "Report back here next Friday at 1400 hours with your decision," the captain said. "And Chen, regardless of what you decide, I want you to know that your demonstration the other day was impressive by any standard. You've already proven you have exceptional abilities." As Sarah left the captain's office, her mind was spinning with possibilities and questions. The walk back to her barracks gave her time to process what had just happened, but also raised new concerns about the magnitude of the decision she was facing. That evening, she found herself on the phone with her family for the first time since the shooting demonstration. Her parents had already heard about her success through military channels, but they didn't fully understand what it might mean for her future. "Honey, we're so proud of what you've accomplished," her mother said, her voice carrying clearly over the connection. "Your grandfather would have been thrilled to know that his teaching had such an impact." Her father, a practical man who had always supported her decisions, asked the question she had been expecting. "So what happens now? Do you think this changes your plans for after the military?" Sarah realized she didn't have a good answer to that question yet. When she had enlisted, her plan had been straightforward. Serve for 4 years, learn some useful skills, and then return to civilian life with the benefits and experience that military service provided. Now she was being offered opportunities that could extend her service significantly and take her in directions she had never considered. "I'm not sure yet, Dad," she admitted. "I've been offered some advanced training opportunities that could be really significant for my career, but they would also mean a much longer commitment to military service." Her grandfather's brother, Uncle Robert, was also on the call. He had served in the army during the Cold War and understood military life in ways her parents didn't. "Sarah," he said, his voice carrying the authority of experience, "opportunities like this don't come along very often in military careers. If they're offering you specialized training based on demonstrated ability, it means they see potential in you that goes beyond standard service." He paused before continuing. "Your grandfather used to talk about the importance of being ready when opportunity knocked. He said that in the military, timing and preparation coming together could define a person's entire career." Sarah appreciated his perspective, especially coming from someone who understood both military culture and the family history that had shaped her shooting skills. "The question you need to ask yourself," Uncle Robert continued, is whether you're ready for the level of commitment and responsibility that comes with advanced training. It's not just about being able to shoot well. It's about being trusted with missions that can have serious consequences. After the call ended, Sarah spent time alone thinking about everything that had happened over the past few days. The shooting demonstration had started as a simple desire to prove herself capable, but it had opened doors she hadn't even known existed. She thought about her grandfather and the lessons he had taught her during those long afternoons in the Oregon mountains. His instruction had been about more than just marksmanship. He had taught her about patience, discipline, and the responsibility that came with deadly skills. A gun is just a tool, he had often said. The person using it is what makes it dangerous or protective. The most important thing you can learn is judgment about when to use your skills and when to walk away. As she considered the captain's offer, Sarah realized that her decision would be about more than just career advancement. It would be about stepping into a level of responsibility and commitment that would fundamentally change who she was as a person. The next few days passed quickly as Sarah went through her regular training routine while grappling with the decision that would shape her future. Her fellow recruits had noticed the change in how she was being treated by the instructors, and some had figured out that something significant was being offered to her. Private Johnson, who had initially been skeptical about her shooting abilities, approached her after a training exercise.
"Chen, I don't know what's going on with you and the officers, but I wanted to say that what you did on the range was incredible. I've never seen shooting like that."
His acknowledgement meant more to Sarah than he probably realized. Acceptance from her peers was important, especially if she was going to be moving into roles that required trust and mutual respect.
"Thanks, Johnson," she replied.
"I was just applying what I'd learned growing up. Your hunting experience in Texas probably gave you similar skills. Maybe at shorter ranges," he said with a laugh. "But what you did was on a completely different level. If they're offering you advanced training opportunities, you should definitely consider them." As Friday approached, Sarah found herself increasingly certain about what her answer would be. The opportunity to develop her skills further, to serve in a capacity that could make a real difference, and to honor the training her grandfather had given her, all pointed toward the same decision. The night before her meeting with Captain Rodriguez, she made one final phone call home to let her family know what she had decided. The conversation was emotional, filled with pride and concern in equal measure, but ultimately supportive of whatever choice she made. "We trust your judgment, honey," her mother said. "You've always been mature beyond your years, and if you feel this is the right path for you, we'll support you completely." Friday afternoon arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures, a stark contrast to the momentous nature of the decision Sarah was about to communicate. As she walked across the base toward the captain's office, she felt the same calm certainty that had guided her during the shooting demonstration. She was ready to take the next step in a journey that had begun in the mountains of Oregon and was now leading toward challenges and opportunities she could barely imagine. Captain Rodriguez looked up from his paperwork as Sarah knocked on his office doorframe at precisely 1400 hours. His expression was professional but curious, clearly interested in hearing her decision about the sniper school opportunity that had been offered to her. "Private Chen, please come in and have a seat," he said, gesturing to the same chair she had occupied during their previous meeting. "I trust you've had time to give this opportunity the consideration it deserves." Sarah entered the office with the confident bearing that had been developing since her shooting demonstration. The week of reflection had crystallized her thinking about what she wanted from her military service and how she could best contribute to the mission. "Yes, sir, I have," she replied as she took her seat. "After careful consideration and discussion with my family, I've decided to accept the opportunity to attend sniper school." Captain Rodriguez nodded approvingly, though his expression remained serious. "I'm glad to hear that, Chen. I think you're making a decision that will serve both you and the military well. However, before we proceed with the paperwork, I want to make sure you fully understand what you're committing to." He opened a folder that contained more detailed information about the sniper program and the obligations that came with it. First, successful completion of the program will extend your service commitment by an additional 4 years beyond your current enlistment. This is non-negotiable and reflects the significant investment the military will be making in your training. Sarah had expected this requirement and had factored it into her decision-making process. The additional service time was substantial,
but it also represented an opportunity to build a career around skills she genuinely possessed and enjoyed developing. Second, the captain continued, the training itself is extremely demanding. The physical requirements alone eliminate many candidates, and the mental pressure is unlike anything you've experienced in basic training. You'll be tested in ways that push you to your absolute limits. He turned a page in the folder, revealing statistics about the program that were sobering. Of the last class of 42 candidates, 13 completed the program successfully. The washout rate has been consistent over the past several years, and there's no reason to expect it will be different for your class. Sarah appreciated his directness about the challenges she would face. It demonstrated that this was a serious professional commitment rather than just an opportunity to advance quickly through the ranks. Third, and perhaps most importantly, successful graduates of the program are often assigned to units and missions that carry significantly higher risk than standard military service. The nature of sniper operations means you may find yourself in situations where the margin for error is essentially zero. Captain Rodriguez closed the folder and looked directly at her. Given all of that information, are you still committed to pursuing this path? Yes, sir, I am, Sarah replied without hesitation. I understand the risks and obligations, and I believe this is how I can best serve. The captain smiled for the first time during their conversation. Good. Your confidence is well-founded based on what you've demonstrated so far, but confidence alone won't get you through the program. You'll need to develop every aspect of your abilities, not just marksmanship. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a substantial packet of papers. These are your transfer orders and preliminary paperwork for the program. You'll report to Fort Benning in 3 weeks for pre-assessment testing, which includes medical evaluation, psychological screening, and basic fitness requirements. Sarah accepted the packet, understanding that these papers represented a fundamental shift in her military career trajectory. The weight of the document seemed to symbolize the significance of the commitment she was making. There's one more thing I should mention, Captain Rodriguez said. Your performance at the shooting demonstration has generated interest from some very senior people in the special operations community. While you'll initially be training for standard sniper operations, there may be opportunities for even more specialized roles if you excel in the program. This was the first concrete mention of the specialized units that had been hinted at during their previous conversation. Sarah felt both excitement and apprehension at the possibility of even more challenging assignments. Sir, could you provide more details about what those opportunities might involve? Not at this point, the captain replied. Those discussions would only become relevant after successful completion of sniper school. But I wanted you to know that your potential has been recognized at levels well above this unit. As their meeting concluded, Captain Rodriguez stood and extended his hand. Chen, I want you to know that I have complete confidence in your ability to succeed in this program. Your combination of natural ability, proper training foundation, and professional attitude gives you advantages that many candidates lack. Sarah shook his hand firmly, feeling the weight of his confidence and her own determination. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. I don't expect you will, he replied. Now, you have 3 weeks to prepare for what will probably be the most challenging experience of your life so far. Use that time wisely. The 3 weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparation activities. Sarah's daily routine shifted to include intensive physical conditioning, additional marksmanship practice, and studying materials about advanced shooting techniques and military tactics. Sergeant Martinez, who had become one of her strongest supporters since the shooting demonstration, took a personal interest in helping her prepare for the challenges ahead. His experience with military marksmanship training proved invaluable in identifying areas where she could improve before arriving at sniper school. Chen, he said during one of their practice sessions, you have natural ability that most people would kill for, but natural ability alone won't be enough for what you're about to face. The instructors at sniper school will push you harder than you've ever been pushed before. He set up a series of increasingly difficult shooting scenarios designed to simulate some of the challenges she would encounter in the program. They'll make you shoot when you're exhausted, when you're stressed, when conditions are terrible, and when failure could mean letting down your team. You need to develop the mental toughness to perform under those conditions. The practice sessions were brutal but effective. Sarah found herself shooting accurately even when physically exhausted from running, or when dealing with artificial time pressure that simulated combat conditions.
Each successful shot under difficult circumstances built her confidence and demonstrated that her skills were adaptable to various situations. Her fellow recruits watched these preparation activities with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. Most of them were completing their standard basic training and preparing for assignments to regular units, while Sarah was obviously being prepared for something much more demanding. Private Johnson approached her one evening after a particularly intense practice session. "Chen, I just wanted to say that watching you prepare for this has been inspiring. You're working harder than anyone I've ever seen, and it shows that you're taking this opportunity seriously." "Thanks, Johnson," Sarah replied. "The opportunity is incredible, but I know I need to earn it every day. Natural ability only takes you so far." As her departure date approached, Sarah received a letter from her family that touched her deeply. Her grandfather's medals and some of his training materials had been found in the attic, and her parents were sending them to her as preparation for the challenges ahead. The package arrived 2 days before she was scheduled to leave for Fort Benning. Inside were her grandfather's Marine Corps shooting medals, his range notes from Vietnam, and a letter he had written to her years earlier but never given her. The letter was brief but powerful. "Sarah, if you're reading this, it means your shooting has taken you places I hoped it would. Remember that the skills I taught you are just tools. Your character and judgment will determine how those tools are used. Make me proud, but more importantly, make yourself proud." Reading her grandfather's words gave her a connection to the legacy of military service that had shaped her family and her own development. She understood that carrying on that tradition was both an honor and a responsibility. The night before her departure, Sarah had a final conversation with Captain Rodriguez. He had requested the meeting to give her some last-minute advice and to ensure she understood the significance of the opportunity she was pursuing. "Chen, you're about to embark on a journey that will define not just your military career but potentially your entire life," he said. "The training you'll receive at sniper school is among the finest in the world, and the responsibilities that come with graduation are serious ones." He leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "I've seen a lot of soldiers come through this base over the years, and very few have demonstrated the combination of natural ability and professional maturity that you've shown. That gives me confidence that you'll succeed, but it also means people will be expecting great things from you." Sarah appreciated his confidence, while also understanding the pressure that came with high expectations. "Sir, I'll do my best to justify the faith that's been placed in me. I know you will," Captain Rodriguez replied. "But remember that your best is what got you this opportunity in the first place. Trust in your training, trust in your abilities, and trust in your judgment. Those 3 things will serve you well in any situation you encounter." As their conversation concluded, he handed her a final piece of paperwork. "These are contact instructions for staying in touch during your training. I want to hear how you're progressing. And if you need any support or guidance that I can provide, don't hesitate to reach out." The morning of her departure arrived with crisp air and clear skies, weather that reminded Sarah of the hunting mornings she had shared with her grandfather in Oregon. As she loaded her gear into the transport vehicle, she felt the same mixture of excitement and nervousness that had always preceded new challenges. Sergeant Martinez was there to see her off, along with several other instructors and some of her fellow recruits. The informal send-off was touching and demonstrated how much respect she had earned during her short time at the base. "Chen," Sergeant Martinez said as she prepared to leave, "you've already proven you can make impossible shots look routine. Now it's time to prove you can do everything else that comes with being an elite marksman." He handed her a small package. "This is from all of us, something to remind you where this journey started." Inside the package was a photograph from her shooting demonstration, showing her behind the rifle in the moments before making her first impossible shot. On the back, someone had written, "Private Chen," proof that impossible is just another word for untested. "Good luck at sniper school." As the transport vehicle pulled away from the base, Sarah looked back at the range where everything had changed for her just weeks earlier. The journey from that moment to this departure represented a transformation that went far beyond military career advancement. She was no longer just a recruit with unusual shooting skills. She was a soldier embarking on training that would prepare her for responsibilities she was only beginning to understand. The young woman who had quietly volunteered to attempt an impossible shot was becoming someone capable of much more than anyone had initially imagined. The road ahead led to Fort Benning and sniper school,
But beyond that lay opportunities and challenges that would test every aspect of her character and abilities. As the transport vehicle gained speed on the highway, Sarah felt ready for whatever came next, confident in her skills but humble about how much she still had to learn. The shooting demonstration that had started as a simple desire to prove herself capable had opened doors to a future she could never have imagined when she first enlisted. Now it was time to walk through those doors and see where her abilities could take her in service to her country, and in honor of the grandfather who had given her the foundation for everything that was to come.